Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY, called Contact Procedures Volume 4, Chapter 7, written by MeatFcker. The link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Wep unbloodied his last lesson gave him strength as he took on his position in the defensive line. His battle father had delivered the short traditional benediction mere hours ago. Do our bloodline proud, repay the great debt. Somewhere behind him, tucked into his ranks and as bloodied, his family was ready. His birth father and birth mother, his battle father and battle mother, and dozens of his older siblings, cousins, and their mates steadied pulse rifles, and they manned the heavier cannons. They'd hold the Galactic Pride's central command for the lost warrior. The unbloodied crouched in the front ranks, making up for the lack of heavy weapons and experience with numbers and training. Every young warrior must prove themselves before fighting alongside the veterans, and Wep was just one of hundreds who hoped to bloody themselves today. First, they had to survive, though, and that scattered reports coming in from across the station had made the Netra fear what was coming. Beside him, Lael, unbloodied, shifted her grip on the pulse rifle and cradled. The subtle motion was enough to draw Web's gaze. As he twitched his ears in approval, she noticed. Claim me as a mate after we slaughtered these devils, pup. Now's not the time for distractions. Pup, I've known you since we scampered about in the nurseries. Yet you're always going to be a pup to me. Funny how that works. They lapsed into silence and even focused forward until Web spoke. You don't believe in the rumors, Leal snorted. Do you mean the so-called footage of a single human slaughtering 5 of the bloodied with knives, the whispers of ghosts stalking the corridors, or the reports of the Nechi have grown a spine and learned to fight? Web couldn't help but laugh at the last two. Okay, nothing about ghosts, and the thought of the little songbirds in anything other than a full retreat is pretty absurd. But the security videos is a little disturbing. It's supposed to be the last thing the Central picked up before the cams went dead. We didn't lose them. The saviors cut them to keep those treacherous weaker from selling the feeds to the humans. Where'd you hear that from? Our claw leader made the rounds before you made it to the line, gave us the rundown. Terrans fired a handful of merchant vessels without warning and then sent hundreds of troop ships through the gate. Point defense got as many as they could, but the devils kept coming. Lael's ears flared back in a clear disgust as she spoke to the Terrans' callous disregard for their warriors. Web's remained perked and thoughtful. From what he'd seen of the human artists, merchants, and even a few warriors who'd come aboard the Galactic Pride, the Terrans valued any life far too much to toss it aside on the Pride's formidable arsenal. Still, if the alternative was that the saviors were wrong... Claws out, fangs bared, shouted out the pack leader. The Terrans were coming. Pulsar darts started to land around the Netra as Web aimed down his rifle sights, desperately trying to find the target. The humans were damn hot to spot. Instead of the black armored humans he'd expected to find, the oncoming fire seemed to be springing from the scores of heavily blurred figures. Web fired towards the Terrans, but it passed harmlessly through a patch of distorted light that he'd been certain he'd held a human. His other packmates fared a little better. A brief flicker of movement caught Web's eye, causing the Netra to spray a burst of pulsar darts towards the ceiling. A small, armored figure popped into existence and dropped to the ground, its chest mangled with 4 lucky hits. Beside him, Lael took out a feral cry of delight. Somebody just earned their stripes! The pack leader must have been watching, because a few seconds later, orders came through for every 4th unbloodied to focus their fire upwards. Enemy fire concentrated on these shooters, but it was too late. Web's quick thinking stopped the Nechi from overflanking the defenders and crushing them instantly. The Terrans kept advancing, though, forcing the compact soldiers back meter by meter, while straying outside of the Netra's effective range. Several of the unbloodied abandoned their positions, bringing dishonor and shame to their dying bloodline, but Web and Neil stood fast. 1,000-strong pack was soon reduced to less than 300. The Terrans picked off the defenders with a ruthless efficiency, pairing heavy suppressive fire with lethally accurate sharpshooters, while the Netra could only snap off poorly aimed shots whenever they could spot one of the indistinctive attackers. Most went wide. Human forms flickered insubstantially as they sprang from cover to cover, never staying in the open long enough for the defenders to line up a shot. The push forward by 40 or so unbloodied was cut down long before they could reach the offensive lines. The countercharge by the Terran troops reached the Netra lines and almost routed their entire force. By the time they'd fallen back to the final positions just outside of Central, the defenders numbered less than 50. Webb wasn't sure that they'd even managed to kill any Terrans. Every one of the elusive attackers that they'd hit had been quickly hustled back behind the advancing line. The surviving unbloodied mixed in with the remaining blooded, and they seasoned veterans pausing ever so briefly to present each juvenile with their blood stripes to mark them as warriors. It was supposed to be a triumphant moment, a celebration of Netra's courage and valor, but Webb felt nothing but bitterness as he accepted the heavy cloth badge. They lied to us, thought the Netra. The blasted Okwa lied to us. Webb had stepped over the corpse of his battle father, his birth mother, and 3 of his closest siblings. He'd fought alongside his birth father's side as a proud warrior, and was killed by Terran warriors that he could barely see. And Lael was dead. Her shoulder was shattered by one of the hellishly accurate human snipers. Webb had been forced to leave the unconscious and bleeding body behind and retreated. His pack was broken and his family was slaughtered. He had nothing yet, and yet the great debt must still be repaid. Webb checked the charge of his rifle and prepared himself for death. He hoped that the Terrans made it quick. Beyond the fortified door, 3 senior compact undersecretaries bickered. "These intruders should have been stopped by your soldiers," shouted the lizard-like Murid, gesturing savagely at the Okar military commander. No, they should have been stopped by the expensive anti-ship defenses, which were destroyed by the humans, artists, and merchants you let on board the station. They were artists. One of the members of my egg circle had a lunch with a human from the damn security footage. He writes poetry. Not war poetry either. We didn't think those poets on board. Most of his books were taken up by what humans call flowers. Couldn't the Terrans have forged their records? Hardly. Any of our artists and merchants who've spoken to theirs have come away raving. Whatever else they might be, their poets are indeed poets. So you're saying that was a failure of our intelligence then? A failure on my part? Both the Okwa and the Murid turned to look at the senior undersecretary. A squid like Alpia, the angry bluster immediately turned to fright. The Murid spoke first. No, never. We wouldn't dream of questioning your networks. Good. Then stop squabbling and start figuring out how to get us out of here. The Murid are clearly to blame for letting the trial go out of hand. The lizard flinched as if it had been struck, and then nodded graciously as the Pride's military commander. The Okwa spoke in a hesitant voice. There isn't a way out. Terran forces have cut us off from all 9 exterior bays, brought the rail car system to the ground, and managed to ferret out the bolt holes that we'd normally be commanding from. Unless those curs outside hold off the human advance, we're done. Send more Netra. It matters not if we lose hundreds or 1,000. There aren't any more Netra to send. Half the garrison was caught out of position, and the other half has been wiped out. The humans cut through the worthless rabble like they're nothing. What options are left then? Well, the humans did offer to let us surrender. Webb stared at his new pack leader in disbelief. Surrender? Our pack has never suffered the shame of surrender. The Netra flicked his ears helplessly. We fight for the Savior's pleasure, and the Savior's demand surrender. Now get that rifle down and try not to look threatening. Webb complied, his ears flaring back with rage. Damn the Saviors, damn them for throwing away everything that his pack had died to protect. The Terran soldier surged forward and Webb closed his eyes. Unwilling to watch what would come next, he hoped that the executions were painless. The Netra's eyes snapped open in surprise when one of the taller Terrans, a human, snapped restraints onto his hands and feet, and then gestured for him to rise. He complied weakly, desperately trying to figure out what was happening. Were the humans leading him away to kill him quietly? Did they plan to maim him, forcing him to bear the shame of surrender for the rest of his life? Was he to become one of their slaves? Webb's mind was still churning when they led him back to the makeshift camp, set a few hundred meters away from the blood-soaked corridors. Scores of injured humans and Neji were laid on stretchers, all far less threatening and without the terrifying powered armor. Next came the morgue, where perhaps 20 shrouded corpses lay, and beyond that was even more injured, but none of these warriors were Terran. They were Netra. Webb let out a strangled gasp and hobbled towards the wounded figures. The guards raised his weapons, preparing to fire, but another gestured for him to wait. Their prisoners moved, hardly seemed threatening. Webb was soon bent over barely conscious Lael, awkwardly cradling her head in his arms. She was delirious, drunk on whatever medicine the humans had used to keep the pain at bay, but she still stirred at his touch. Webb, she croaked at we. Later, he whispered, choking back his tears. Worry later. For now, rest. Webb returned to the line of prisoners with his ears perked and thoughtful. The Okur had deceived his people on the Galactic Pride. What else might the saviors be lying about? Lotus Station's central command was filled with soldiers, Jenkins and Tweety amongst them. Slater had declined to join the final charge against the compact troops. Hey, Tweety, this one is one of those things that I'm not supposed to touch. The Nechi, one wing swaddled in an armored cast, glanced over at Jenkins. Yes, Jenkins, that's a transmitter. Probably good for the station intercom or the official compact network. Now step back before you. What are you doing? The Marine paused his finger over the broadcast key. What do you think I'm doing? Being you, I suppose. Give me a few seconds to get out of the room before you destroy what's left of your career. Thanks, Tweety. You're the best. No, I was never here. Now, don't you have a major to piss off? Right, yeah. Jenkins squared his shoulders and turned on the pickup. Lotus Station, this is Lieutenant Walsh Jenkins. You might remember me from when I stormed the former GCS Ram 7 years ago. You may also wonder what I'm doing in the PA. Well, wonder no more. Terran's just got ourselves another stick. End of chapter and end of volume. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.